And I'm just going to welcome everybody to our webinar on surrendering to the BOP. This is we're really kind of starting this process again from the beginning because we have so many new people coming into the community. And when we are starting this process, the one thing I'd like to ask before, Justin, you say what you say, is please be prepared to ask questions. This becomes really valuable to everybody if you're prepared to ask questions. And we kind of follow a format where we go through kind of a structured presentation. It typically takes about an hour to go through the structured presentation, but we're very fluid, very flexible, and we're here to serve you. So there are no questions you can't ask us. We will respond to all of your questions. If we don't get responses through in the first 60 minutes, we'll stay on as long as it takes to help everybody get an understanding of where we are and really to help you. That's what this is all about, is helping you develop a sense of confidence as you go through these difficult times. And I've prepared a PowerPoint that I'll share with you, and it's already going to be on the website. But I just wanted to start give you those kind of, make sure that you're ready to ask questions, because we're going to go through a series of webinars. I'm going to explain why there's a series, because we really want to help you get the best outcome. Justin, go ahead, please.
I'd love for you to remind and reiterate that we can't change the past, or sometimes people get to prison and they hear things and they think because a law exists, they may immediately get released. And I just think reiterating those things for everyone to hear, because I got a call from a mom whose son is in prison on like a 5-year sentence, and not a client of ours, but he hears things that based on laws that have passed, he should immediately be released. And it's just not realistic. So I just think it's important reiterating what we can and cannot change and whatnot. I'd love for you to just reiterate that if you would.
Well, coincidentally, I have a PowerPoint that I want to put up on the screen and share with you so that when I'm presenting, you can kind of follow along and you'll understand what some of the things that I want to talk about today. And that's going to be really one of the first ones. So it's just kind of coincidental that Justin brought that up, because wherever you are in this journey, you've got to realize you're going into an environment that is very different from any place else, anything else you've ever experienced. But you have had these kinds of changes in your life before, whether it was when you were preparing for college and you went on college tours, and you probably worked with people that helped maybe coach on the SAT, or you took classes on it. You looked for people that have gone through it before so that they could help you prepare for something that's different. But there's nothing more different than finding that the US government has charged you with a federal crime. And it's very important for you to be thinking about well, what can I do forward? And in the past, when it first started, because it was so new to you, it's very likely that you hired lawyers that you probably have never had to think about working with a criminal defense attorney before, but you hired a lawyer, and your lawyer may have served you really well and given you a high level of confidence so that you know what's going forward. But in our experience, a lot of times people don't get that level of comfort. They don't know what to do, and they expect something from their lawyer. Can anybody, I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now, because I think this is most valuable when we are interactive. And is there somebody that might share an experience of, they found out they were the target of an investigation, they later had to deal with a defense attorney for the first time, and they had a different experience today from what they expected the first time they went before that attorney? Is there anybody that can tell us a story about that? And if you can, just go ahead and unmute yourself and talk. So if nobody wants to contribute, I'm going to give you some guide. There's a takeaway in that.
Michael, I don't mind sharing.
Yeah, tell us, Michael.
I'm still dealing. I'm not sentenced yet. My case has been put off 10 times. So I'm over 3.5 years into this. My first response with an attorney was a real prominent attorney here in town. He deals with a lot of state stuff. He wouldn't even touch the federal stuff. So that kind of took the wind out of my sails because I had a lot of trust in this attorney. He did end up finding me an attorney in a different 3 hours away. And it's been nothing but a waste of money, in my opinion. I've gotten more out of Sam and Mr. Hartman and y'all over the last few weeks than I have at all from him. It's like we constantly button heads. I told him I did not have the money to fight it, and a lot of the things that I thought he could have fought harder for, as far as the charges, before I had to plead to the charges. I thought he should have done a better job, but it's
So,
their.
so,
I found out quick it's their narrative, not mine.
so Michael, but there's a good takeaway here for everybody that's on the program, because I suspect that what you experience has gone through with a lot of people, and that the challenge, the difference between maybe working with a defense attorney and working with us, there's nothing you can't ask us. And there's this old cliche, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. We are trying to give you this vision of what's coming so that you can prepare yourself to get the best possible outcome. And like Justin said, you're going to have a lot of misinformation coming your way, not only now, but while you're in prison as well. What I pledge to you is there's nothing you cannot ask us, and we will always be honest with you. And we will always try to make sure that you understand, hey, there's a reason for what we are saying, and that includes on these webinars. But if you are not investing the time to learn more about this journey ahead, you're going to be in this situation, the same situation you are with your attorney, in that I don't know what to do. What can I do? And there are a lot of things that you can do, but it all starts with understanding this journey ahead. There's what we want to be for you is just the opposite of what your attorneys have left you with. If your attorneys have left you with the feeling that you're alone and you don't know what to do going forward, we want to make sure that never happens with us. But the only way we can do it is if this is interactive and you do your homework on your side. I mean, I was in prison. I don't know, most of you, I don't know, unless you've been on some of the previous webinars. I've had some but I was in prison for 26 years. So I can't give you all of the information that I have in 26 years in a couple of 1-hour segments or at any time. What I can do is structure it in such a way with hopes that you will come up with some takeaways on what questions you should ask us to help yourself. Because once you get sentenced, and even before you get sentenced, you are very much on this self-service plan. You're going to be left alone a lot. And that means, you didn't know how to hire a lawyer, you get disappointed. Our role is to make sure that we don't disappoint you, but it's also to help you understand expectations, as we have on this bullet point here. Okay? We want you to understand the journey, and we want you to understand what we can do. What we can do is help you understand all of the mechanisms and the levers that you can pull while you're in there and before you get in there to help yourself. But then also to help you while you're inside. One of the things that we really don't like hearing from are people that contact us after they've been sentenced. And because they contacted us after they've been sentenced, they're in a situation where they didn't take preparations before, and so they have problems now. They got designated to the wrong place, for example. It is very hard for us to undo that. It is very hard for us to undo things if you didn't understand the pre-sentence investigation report and you made some statements or something during that time. It's very hard for us to change these things that you may want to have in there. Justin has these challenges all the time. Sam has these challenges all the time. And we don't want that to happen for you. I mean, Justin, I just saw a thing you were writing the other day about somebody's going to the wrong prison. And I mean, why don't you tell them about that and how it would have been different if the people would have asked questions or reached out and participated to educate themselves earlier? Why don't you give them that example of the person that, and as I recall, it was some different designation.
So a lawyer told a client, and I think the lawyer has good intentions, but part of the reason we don't give legal advice is we're not lawyers. It's part of the reason some lawyers shouldn't give Bureau of Prisons or prison advice. They just don't know. And a client of our team was sentenced to 24 months in prison. Maybe on the call right now. We don't have to share the story. He doesn't have to speak. 24 months in prison, a history of abuse. And the lawyer said what a lot of lawyers said, hey, can you send him to the closest prison to his home? Which is one mistake. You want to ask for a specific prison because people have asked for the closest prison to their home and been sentenced to the detention center. And the Bureau of Prison says, why are you complaining? We gave you exactly what you want. So we asked for the closest prison. Then I think he was forced to follow up with a specific prison, asked for Lompoc, which is a mistake because no camp in California offers the drug program. And now he's getting ready to surrender in a week or two, potentially to a prison that doesn't have RDAP, which on a 24-month sentence can really impact. It could keep him in prison longer because now he has to get in, get approved, and get transferred. So now we're trying to redesignate him. The client fully recognized, I know we can't change the past. I should have prepared, should have had the lawyer know what to do. Now we're going to try to change it. But if we are unsuccessful, it will be a harder journey for him to go to a prison that doesn't have the program, try to get transferred. And that just speaks to we can't change things that were done. To the extent that we can try to undo it, we've tried to amend PSR reports from prison. I don't think we've ever been successful. We've tried. So to the extent that you can prepare and not look back with continued regret, I wish I knew this. I heard this. I believed it to be true. Just because someone says it doesn't mean it's true. Verify. Watch the webinars. We cover all of this, and we're going to try to change it. Don't know if we'll be successful.
So what Justin is talking about is that there's just you wouldn't even know what can I do to position myself for a better prison. You wouldn't even know what to do unless you're participating and educating yourself on everything about the system. And we do these every Friday and Saturday. We try to do it. Well, we don't try. We do it 2 days a week because we want to make it easy for you if you can't. And if you can't visit us on the live webinar, you can certainly listen on iTunes or watch it on YouTube and get the information so that you can be in a position to help yourself. This is the time for you to be learning about this system, because otherwise you're going to get into the prison system and be wondering about, you're going to have questions about things that are going on in there. And you're going to say, why didn't anybody tell me that? Right? I mean, I'm just going to pull randomly. Jonathan, you've been very active on the programs before, so I think you can unmute yourself and I can ask you again. You're a chiropractor, right? Or a doctor or something?
Correct.
So you're a doctor. How many years have you practiced to be in your profession?
I mean, like, when did I graduate school and get licensed?
Yeah, just how long have you been in the field? 20 years, 30 years?
15 years.
15 years. So all of the knowledge that he received in 15 years, he can't give to me. And I wouldn't even know what to ask him because there's so much. Well, I would bet it's the same thing with many of you. There are so many unusual factors about the prison system and about sentencing and about the pre-sentence investigation report or about supervised release and how everything you're doing today is going to influence that going forward. But if you don't ask questions, if you don't know what questions to ask, we cannot help you as much as we could. We'll always be there. We will always be there. We always want to be a source of trust for you, not only now, but while you're in prison. But we want to help you at the earliest stages possible. Now, I'm about ready to go on to the next slide, but I see that I have a question in chat, which is great because I want to address all these questions in chat. And I also see that Mark has his hand up. So I'm going to, if somebody really wants to get to interact while we're speaking, please do exactly what Mark did. Just raise your hand. There's the section on the bottom of your screen. I think it's under reactions that you could raise your hand, and then I can see that you want to contribute. Or you could just unmute yourself. So, Mark, what is your question?
Thank you, Michael. It was about the PSR. So I had my PSR interview on September 9th, August 9th. and I thought that I would get something back, from the probation officer or whoever it is that does that. I thought they had 30 days, but I haven't gotten anything yet.
And what is your question?
Well, you talked about, what to get in the PSR. So they did the interview. I don't know what's going to be in there when she writes it.
Well, I can promise you one thing, you are going to get the PSR. When she's going to get it to you, that I don't know. Your lawyer could inquire, but you're going to get it. And when you get it, that's going to be the better time to start assessing, okay, is this in good shape?
Right. So I guess that's my question. How long is there like a time period that they?
When is your sentencing date?
The 12th of December.
You'll have it plenty of time to contest it, and you'll have an opportunity to contest it. So,
okay, thank you.
Yeah, you'll have an opportunity to contest it. Okay, if there's something wrong. So let me go back to there's some chats there, Justin. What you could be doing? Can you see the chats, Justin?
Yes.
Well, why don't when I'm talking, like if you're talking, that's kind of one of the things that I try to do. You could respond in the chat to the people, just respond to their questions, or Sam, you could do the same thing, or Scott, if you could respond. But of course, at the end of this, I will look at all of those chats and we'll go over one by one questions. But I want to continue on with the presentation here, and I want to show you. Go to the next slide. So this first slide, remember, it's about making a personal commitment to understand what's ahead at whatever stage in the journey you're in, and to understand you should always ask questions. We will always respond and tell you this is what we would do, and that is the best that we could do. I show you, if I was in that situation now, this is what I would do. This is what I wish I would have known back then. And this is how I would maneuver my way through it. So the second section on this slide here is about, well, what is the basic understanding of what's going to happen when I surrender there? Who are the people I'm going to interact with, and what kind of conversations am I going to have, and what's happened with other people? How do I interact with both the people serving time, and how do I interact with staff? Well, there's an analogy that we like to use in our work, and that's really talking about, being a submarine when you go in there, right? Or you think about a submarine, it goes through the water, underwater, but it has its periscope up and it's seeing everything going on around it, but it's kind of being silent and in stealth mode. And if you're going into prison with a relatively short sentence, and remember, relatively short is not my words. I know if you're going away for a week and a half, it's very hard on you and it's hard on your family. But in the Bureau of Prisons views, a 10-year sentence is considered short. So please remember that and keep that in mind. A sentence of 10 years in the Bureau of Prisons is considered a short-term offender. So that might seem preposterous to a lot of you, but it's important to remember that from both your interactions with staff and your interactions with other people. Because just because you're going to a minimum security camp or a low security prison, it doesn't mean you're going to be around, people who are of the same mindset as you. There's going to be people there that have a different mindset. Let me just put it that way. And so it becomes very, very important for you to have a very deliberate plan of understanding how do I get through this journey? How do I get through this journey in the most efficient and the least obstructive, so that I can we always remember the objective. The objective is to get released at the soonest possible time. And so I have to keep my eyes open all the time about what's going on around me. What opportunities can I seize to advance my release date, or to get a better experience, or to get a higher level of liberty at the soonest possible time? If I don't know what those levers are that I can pull, I don't know how to do it. If I don't know how I'm going to interact with other people who are there and who are those people, I am not as strong as if I understand. Because when you're in there, you're in an environment where there are a lot of people who may not be as proactive as you are. trying to learn, trying to grow, trying to prepare, and they're going to be latching on to every rumor that comes across. Okay, there's actually a word that people use in there called inmate.com, that it's the rumor spreads like a gasoline fire, and a lot of times it's just preposterous information. And it's important to understand that environment so that you can deal with it in the most effective way. Because if you don't, you can find yourself facing challenges with mental health, and you can find depression and despondency. And somebody promised me this, and somebody promised me that, and my lawyer said this, and I was at prison. I was on the webinar, and they said this. Look, that's another reason that we record these webinars. We want you to see we are here to help you understand this journey. And I was very sad early on, and on our last series of the pre-surrender webinar series, because one of the guys that worked with us, he went to prison and he didn't really know how to communicate or interact with other people there. And it's important to remember that where you're going, if you're on this webinar, you are not going to what I would call a dangerous type of place. It may seem dangerous to you because you've never been there before, okay? But remember, I was in every security level, from a high security penitentiary to a medium security FC federal correctional institution to a low security federal correctional institution to a minimum security camp. And I know the difference in these areas, and I know what the mindset is where you're going. At the mindset where you're going, you should think of you're like going to a community, and in that community, there are going to be some bad people there, but those bad people are going to be kind of quiet. They're not going to want to leave where they are because it's super simple in lower security than it is in higher security. So they don't want to really go back. So you'll see people that have maybe a harder disposition about them, but it's going to be a small fraction of the population. Don't mix with that population. Don't try to interact with people who are, have a criminogenic mindset. And there are going to be people there that have gang ties. They're not going to be active because they wouldn't be on the camp if they're active. Okay. But sometimes people get arrested and get charged and convicted for a crime that, let's just say they falsified a mortgage fraud application. Okay, that's what they got charged for. So they got sentenced to 3 years. Let's just say hypothetically. That doesn't mean the guy's not a hitman for the Gambino crime family. Okay, there is that element in there, but you can understand what you got to have a mindset in there saying, I don't have to mix with them. I don't have to respond to their questions. I can use all of my critical thinking skills to find people that look like me, talk like me, has the same mindset as I have, and really just want to get the best possible experience. Scott is a member of our team, but he was also somebody who just got out of federal prison in a camp. Scott, could you give our audience just a little bit of insight on the people with whom that you found at the camp?
Sure. And Michael, I really agree with everything that you just said there. As far as violence or being concerned is a factor, it's just not. I had absolutely zero issues the entire 14 months. You made a great point. Maybe the people who have had a violent past or were convicted of violent crimes, they have worked very hard to find themselves at a camp, and they want to do nothing that would result in them leaving the camp. I think the most dangerous person at a camp is you, right? In terms of your mental health and just staying strong, but you're not going to have problems with anybody else. I've been out for 2 months now, and I can honestly say I miss so many of the people there. I would go back for a weekend if they would let me, just to see some of them. So instead of fearing it, I think there's a camaraderie amongst the inmates, and you will connect with more people than you think. And there's more of a community there waiting for you than you anticipate.
And Scott, just for those who didn't hear your story before, let them know your sentence length and how much you actually served.
Sure. So I had a 0 to 6 month guideline range, and I did not respond to the government in the most appropriate manner. And that turned into a 51 to 57 month guideline range. So it's not just what you do, it's how you respond to the charges alleged against you. With that 51 to 57 month range, I worked hard. The judge gave me a downward variance and sentenced me to 42 months. I qualified for RDAP. I was able to get into the program about 3 weeks after I arrived, and I ended up doing 13 and a half months on a 42-month sentence, and now I'm home on home confinement.
And this is really valid information for you to consider, because a lot of times attorneys don't understand that, right? It's easy to flip out of sorts when you say, I'm looking at 4 years or 5 years or 6 years or 7 years in prison. But if a person prepares himself well, that person can start sowing seeds today that can influence when this period ends. But again, it comes with this commitment of a willingness to work hard and to prepare before you get in there, but also to prepare once you're in there. And that includes how are you going to interact with different people. So if you have, for example, I've got on there this bullet point here about Chuck and his experience. Chuck is a friend of ours. He was on this webinar for a long time, but when he went to prison, he found himself surrounded with some of these people that perhaps should not be in a camp, but they are there. And they start asking questions about, what are you here for? How much time do you have? What did you do? Did you cooperate? And Chuck, not being, concerned about this, he said, yeah, I cooperated really extensively with the prosecutor and I got a lower sentence. And that's the victory, right? He got a lower sentence, but you don't want to spread that information around, because when that gets spread around inside of the prison, it can result in some more difficult interactions with other people. It can result in ostracization. You get ostracized by other people there. It can just be a difficult experience for a lot of people that I just don't think you have to have. If you go in there and you say, I'm just going to be silent and quiet until I find my people, the people with whom I associate with, they're like me, they think like me, just be kind of reserved and not talking about your background. Just say, I'm here serving, 42 months or 36 months or 28 months or whatever. And I really want to put this into my past, and I'm focused on doing whatever I can to get the best outcome. And that's how I want to leave it. And if you don't want to talk to me, that's okay if you do, but I'm not here to run the camp. I'm here to get out. And that's a confident way of responding, and people will respect that, or they'll walk away and that'll be fine. So it's just my advice to really learn as much as you can about this experience. We have more than 1,000 videos on our YouTube channels. We have podcasts. We've got a tremendous amount of information to help you learn, but you've got to want to learn so that you can come and ask us these types of questions so that we can help you better all the way through the journey. And so this is the first of this series that we do. It's a rather lengthy series. And I also want you to be seeing not only when we're on the webinars, but on your own time. Many of you may have come into I suspect that there's quite a few people on here, and I would not be surprised to say if I didn't communicate with 5 of you, or 2% of you, I don't know you, because we have a team and everybody on our team has a role. You may have come through our channel of White Collar Advice, which my partner Justin runs, and Sam run, and and Larry run, and all of those things. But one thing we always say is that anything you get from White Collar Advice, you can get for free on Prison Professors. That's what I run. It's free. Okay. But you've got to invest the time. That's why you need Larry and Sam and Kayla and Ash and Justin and Sam, because there's so much information that you can't internalize it all. And in those cases, it makes a lot of sense to interact. But if you want to just do it on your own, I really recommend that you go through this website that we update every week, frequently several times a day, to provide information that will help you through this really difficult, challenging time in your life. And what we've created for you are, if you look, and I'm going to just go back here, there are all these different types of articles that have YouTube channels and information here about how do you understand what you can do. And one of those things to understand is like this article here, and you can find it, the mitigation arc. What is it? How do you understand these different stages? If we could have spoken with all of you 5 years ago, hopefully we could have given you information to keep you from ever getting charged, but we didn't. If we could have spoken with you when you hired your attorney, we could have given you information that we hope would have been helpful to you, but we didn't. If we could have spoken with you at the PSR report or the sentencing time or after, we didn't. You've got to understand we can only deal with reality as it exists. And so I would encourage you to read these articles on mitigation, because they're I think if all of you look back, like Michael White is awesome because he's involved in this before, at the very early stages of his journey. And he's learning about different things that he can do. But on the website, we've got these other things that I would recommend that you watch. It will take you a long time. That's right. To go through all of this work, right? Think of this as like you're preparing yourself for what is going to be the most challenging time of your life. And that, I would say, you need to listen to these interviews with people like the chief probation officer. He's going to talk with you about what matters to him and his colleagues when you're trying to get a higher level of liberty. What role does this person play in your life? He gives excellent advice that if you watch this video, you're going to be more prepared to understand the journey ahead. If you watch this video that I did with the former director of the Bureau of Prisons, you're going to get a lot of information that will help you about how the Bureau of Prisons operates and what you can do to pull the levers so that you can get a better pathway through there. These are, if you haven't been sentenced yet, or if you anticipate the possibility that you may be sentenced again, watch these interviews that we did with federal judges. Or if you know that you're going to want to come to a home confinement at some point, watch this interview here with the former head of the entire halfway house home confinement program, or this interview with a former warden in the Bureau of Prisons. There is so much information, and it's all right here under this subject matter experts tab, and we keep adding to it. Here, you've got this section here, which is what are some resources that can help you before you are sentenced? Yes, there's a tremendous amount of information here for you to read, learn, watch, listen to, but it will help you get ready to deal with what's coming after sentencing. What should you know? A tremendous amount of information that will help you all the way through the journey. Advocacy work. What are the different things that you should be learning about so that you can get through this journey and seize opportunities or create opportunities? Because sometimes that's what you have to do while you're in there. It would be wonderful if the Bureau of Prisons always did what Congress wants it to do, but it doesn't. So what do you do when that happens? If you don't know where to turn, you could make decisions that can extend your time in prison instead of advancing you to come home. But our team, our mitigation experts, we've gone through it. We've pulled the levers. I've certainly pulled a lot of levers. The difference is when I was in prison, and I've been home for 9 years now, the laws that exist today did not exist back then. So there are laws that can really work to your advantage if you know what to do. If you don't know what to do, then this is the time to ask the question. If you don't know the question to ask, then write it down when it comes to you after you've read some things and say, hey, I got a question on this. I've got a question on that. And I think that I'm looking at the chat right now. You're seeing that it's pretty active, that we are responsive to you, and we will be responsive to you. We will give you the resources that you need to help yourself, not only now before you surrender, but when you go to prison. That's what part of this program is, because the Bureau of Prisons is a massive bureaucracy. And it doesn't always do the will of Congress. And so sometimes we have to know, what do we do in this situation? And you can see what we do with the resources, right? That's my role, is that how the nonprofit, I take resources that Justin and Sam provide from White Collar Advice, and I go hire subject matter experts, former wardens, former head of healthcare, former head of halfway houses. And I'll say, hey, we've got this situation, because you can't hire those people. I mean, they can't work with guys who are in the system. They've got some kind of not the equivalent of a non-compete clause or something, where they can't advocate or lobby for people. But they can do it informally, which is what they do with us. I just had that situation. I don't know, is John and Kathy on this webinar? If they are, please unmute yourself and talk. They're not, so I'm going to tell you, they're one of those situations where they kind of came to us a little bit late after they were sentenced. So they didn't do the right work to get to the right prison. And as a result, he's at a prison more than 1,000 miles away from his home, and he's not going to get the health care that he needs. And so it's very hard for him, because his lawyer won't respond to him. He doesn't know what to do. What did we do? Well, we hired the former head of healthcare for a region of the Bureau of Prisons and a former warden, and we asked him to assist us. And when he assisted us, one of them advised us on who to write. The other one actually picked up the phone and called. We had 2 wardens. The other one actually picked up the phone and called a colleague at the region and is working hard to get the person redesignated. Will it work? I don't know. But what I do know is, if you don't understand this machine that you're going into, you're going to try and change the machine, but you're a cog in the machine. Don't try to change the machine. Try to figure out, okay, how do I maneuver myself to get the best possible outcome?
Can I offer one thought, Michael?
Of course you can.
Thank you. So Michael mentioned, if you were to look back 5 years or something like that, most of you or all of you never would have imagined that you were immersed in a government investigation. Michael used to say to me in prison, you could imagine getting leprosy before you would ever end up in prison. And that's true. And I share this because a client of our team is getting ready to go in a couple of weeks. And I asked him if he had watched the prior webinars. He said, I will. I said, I want you to watch the disciplinary infraction webinar. It's really important. And he said, Justin, I'm not going to get into any trouble in prison. That is like a waste of my time. I'm not going to have an iPhone or get into trouble. And it's sort of like, I asked him, do you think 5 years ago you ever would have gotten into trouble and gone to prison? He's like, no, absolutely not. So none of you expect to get into trouble in prison, just like none of you ever expected to become immersed in a government investigation. So here it is. Now, based on that call, he immediately watched the webinar that all of you have access to. We spoke and he said, that was a really important webinar. I can see how one bad decision that you don't think is bad can get you into trouble in prison, just like it brought many of us into the system. So this only works if you're going through the work and the webinars that we're creating and coming to these webinars with questions. Thanks for letting me chime in.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it's a great point, because if you're saying a statement, I'm not going to break any rules in prison, well, that's a statement that's based on ignorance of not knowing the system, because there's no way you're going to go through prison and not break any rules. It's almost like saying, in the United States, we've got a big government. We've got more laws than any place else in the land of the free. And every day, somebody's committing something. There's a new felony being done. You don't even know what is a felony. But that's only one concept of it, is you don't know all of the rules. The second is, you're not thinking about the motivations of the other people. You're not thinking about a staff member. I want everybody just to kind of pause right now and just think for a second, what person grows up and says, I want to build my career in the Bureau of Prisons? Who is that person? Just stop and process that for a moment. All of you have done something. This is not to disparage anybody who's chosen that career. It's a fine career. For a lot of people, that's great. But think about them. Who are they? What are their motivations? What is success look like in their career? If they're in that career, they want to advance. How do they advance? They advance a lot of times by writing disciplinary infractions. That looks great on their resume. If Justin was a stockbroker, what made him look good as a stockbroker? Bring in more assets under management. Really simple. Okay. In business, it's sales. It's all about sales, right? Sales, builds the business. So bring more sales in, you look great. Okay. In the Bureau of Prisons, somebody's working there. The main priority has always been for many, many years, security of the institution. How do you advance your career in there? By demonstrating you're protecting security. How do you do that? By writing disciplinary infractions. So you may not have to do anything in order to get one. But if you don't understand it, you don't get it. You don't see the significance of it. And it can result in a whole parade of horribles that will follow, because you get a disciplinary infraction, it influences your pattern score. You influence your pattern score, it influences your ability to earn time credits. There's so many factors that if you don't understand, it's important for you to get that understanding. And so I do want to highlight emphasis on what Justin just said, and that is stay with these program, this commitment to learning, and learn from all of these people, the subject matter experts, learn from the articles that we do, learn from the webinars where we're interactive, because this is the first one. But this is the one where we're showing you, hey, it's not only the Friday, Saturday time that we spend together, you are going into an environment that is fundamentally different from any place you've ever lived before. It's very different. And if I can't share everything with you that I know. I will if you ask questions, but I'm going to tell you, hey, you need to do some research so that you could find out about the Bureau of Prisons. And where would you go to find that information besides this website here, where there's a lot of information? Okay. You also want to go here to the BOP.gov. And you want to look at this information because there's a lot that you can learn. If you go here to resources, you can look at policies and forms, and it would make sense for you to look at some of those policies and forms so that you understand them. It would also be important for you to go here to locations and look at all of their locations, a list of their facilities. There's so many. This is a huge bureaucracy that incarcerates more than 100,000 people, and more than 36,000 staff members work there. So if you want to understand what's going on at Hazleton, you'll click Hazleton and you'll say, well, is it the FCI? Is it the USP? Let's take a look at the USP, because the camp probably operates from the USP, which is where somebody would be going. You could scroll down here. You could get information about, well, how do I send mail here? How do I send money here? Okay, I covered that a little bit later in this webinar as well. You're going to want to make sure that you open the handbook wherever you're going and read the handbook, because this handbook will give you some insights on how does the prison operate. And it will also open opportunities for you and I, or you and our team, to have a conversation. You'll want to know, what can I buy there? Well, you get that information right there. And you say, oh, the commissary, this is what I'm allowed to buy. How do I spend money there? How do I do these different types of things there, right? So the more I understand about the prison where I'm going and the prison system, the better off you're going to be in navigating this process. You're going to be able to ask us questions on next week's webinar, which is, I think is on the staff hierarchy and things of that sort. These are all very important data points, because you're going into an environment that is different. I know you shouldn't be going to prison. I'm on your side, okay? I was in there for 26 years, and we incarcerate far too many people, and people serve sentences that are far too long. But what I also know is that you've got to understand the machine. How is it organized hierarchically? Who do I interact with? Who do I get? How do I convert those people that work for the institution to become my advocates so that I don't have to fight, so that I don't have to have any types of contention or trouble with the system? So we want to help you get all that information. That's what this entire process is all about. And it's the reason we ask you to do your research before you get in there. Remember, anybody can raise a hand if they want me to go on to something. But this is another area here that I think is really important, and it's becoming way more important as we deal with just the Bureau of Prisons. One of the areas that's really hard for people that don't go in there is healthcare. If you have any needs for medicine or healthcare, you really want to know, how does the system administer medicine? What steps can I take before I get there to get the type of medical treatment that I need? And what are the policies that drive it? Well, again, you would go back to our website. You would look for the article that covers this type of thing. And I think it's going to be under advocacy. So I think it's here under advocacy news. You'd click on this section here and you'd see the information. This is a webinar that we did with the former head of healthcare for the Bureau. You're going to kind of see what our pattern is. How do we interview people and ask questions from them? And he was also a former warden, so he is talking, and you can sit there. You can see I had to blur his face because he's really not allowed to be giving this information. I guess because of the career the contract he has with the Bureau of Prisons. Although he's retired, he's still working in the space. But we rely upon him to help our members of our community. That's what we use resources from this project for, to hire these experts. And you would also want to be looking at this information here. This is the BOP formulary part 1, where you could read. Well, my wife is a nurse, and she is kind of our head of kind of healthcare advocacy work here. Carol, could you tell me again, part 1 of the formulary? Could you come around and talk so we can hear you, or just talk loud enough? It'd be better if you came over here. You don't have to be on video. My wife's video shy. It's okay. Okay. So go ahead and talk. Okay, I'll block the video. I don't know how to do it. Just talk.
Part 1 explains how the BOP administers medication. It explains substitutions, exceptions, their policies, how they administer something that requires direct observation. Certain drugs are considered high risk, so they have to be swallowed in the presence of either the LVN or the RN or whoever's passing medications. Certain medications are shown here, as Michael's scrolling by, that you may be able to take in the community for one reason, but in the BOP is very limited. For example, a muscle relaxer, you may be prescribed that from your physician for, back pain or muscle spasms. However, in the BOP, that drug would only be administered if you had MS or cerebral palsy or some other very severe medical condition. So there are a lot of limitations. And that's why I really recommend that people, before they go in, if you have prescriptions, if you have medical conditions that are chronic and ongoing, take these documents to your provider and go over them with your provider so that you can plan, you can either wean off something that the VOP is not going to give you, or have them switch you to something that's on the formulary so that
And
you
this
can
is
try it.
that what you would find over here. So here's formulary part 2. And these are, go ahead, Carol, you can talk.
Yeah. So these are the actual, this is their what they actually have in stock and they administer. And if you notice in the upper right corner, those categories, you can see if it says direct observation, MLP, that means a provider, a physician has to sign off on the order. So all of those explanations are in the part 1. But this tells you what is available. Some of these medications are available in the pharmacy that you can purchase, like Tylenol and ibuprofen. I think that Metamucil, things like that.
So the reason this is so important, and this is again like going back to that same conversation that the guy said with Justin, oh, I'm never going to break the rules. But here's the reality. If you have a problem with medicine or healthcare, it could be lethal.
You cannot give medication
Right.
to anyone else.
Right? It could be lethal. It could result, if you're holding medication in an inappropriate way, it could result in a disciplinary infraction. But if you have a problem, what is our commitment to you? If you're part of this community, well, our commitment to you is we are going to help you advocate for yourself. That's one of the many ways that Carol provides enormous value to our team, because you're going to be able to communicate to us, hey, this is what I am experiencing. And then you are going to say, what do I have to do here in response? We can, like Carol had an example the other day where said they violated their own policy and rules, which can work in your favor on these advocacy efforts. We can provide that information to one of our subject matter experts who can tell us, if this happened, do this. If you don't know how to pull the levers, you're not positioning yourself for strength and success. Instead, you're positioning yourself for battling a machine that you don't know how to win. And we want to help you win this process. I see, no questions, so I'm going to keep moving forward here, giving you other resources. At the end of this, I'm going to introduce one of our new teammates, which is going over building this calculator that we're building. And I know that a lot of you will have questions for it. I'm excited to share it with you, but I can see this is getting to be a bit of a long webinar, but it's because we want to make sure that you know where to go to get information. So, and you'll have a copy of this PowerPoint that has these links as well. So before you surrender, make sure that you have a list of the people with whom you want to connect, your telephone numbers, where those mailing addresses are. You're going to want to know, how does the email system work in prison? So we've prepared a video for you that shows it with a real example. You're going to want to know, how do visits work? And so we have links there that give you all of the information that you need to get the responses to your questions that you need. These are all the things that we think you should be doing to prepare before you surrender. And I really want to emphasize, these different concepts of it, like what happens. One of the great fears is thinking about, well, what happens to me once I go in there, right? I don't know. I've never been to jail. I've never been in custody. I don't know what happens. And so there's this like huge fear. And so we can kind of summarize it up. And so we created this slide that just, shows you, what does that look like? Well, just, simply look at the slide and you'll see you're going to be surrender. If you're surrendering to prison, you're going to be put in a holding cell. They may handcuff you. They're going to give you a lot of paperwork to fill out. And you have to understand, what does it mean to fill out all that paperwork? What is the impact? How does that influence my journey in there? There's going to be a strip search. Just own it. Okay. There's going to be a little bit of discomfort and, it's going to feel undignified to strip naked and bend over and let people look at you in a way that you never imagined would happen. But you get through it because it's temporary and none of this defines who you are. Okay. If you're a woman and you're surrendering, we've heard some feedback that if you wear white underwear with no underwire, is there anything else I got to say, Carol? White cotton underwear with no underwire, they may allow you to keep it. And in the male prisons, I've not had that experience where they would allow me to bring anything with me, but just try to get through this mindset that says, look, there are 100,000 people going through it. I'm going to get through it too. Your responses to some of these questions on those forms are going to influence whether you get a lower bunk pass, whether you get soft shoes to wear tennis shoes instead of those, clunky boots that they distribute, whether you can get some type of a permit that says no standing, which may influence your job. All of that is preparation that should have been done before the pre-sentence investigation report. But if you didn't do all of that, well, the second time is when you're in that holding cell and you're responding to some of the challenges of why you need a lower bunk. If you know you need one, then it might make sense to get a letter from your doctor that explains why. Because if you don't, there's a good chance you're going to be sleeping on the top bunk. I always slept on the top bunk. Didn't bother me in the least, but other people prefer the lower bunk, and sometimes it takes seniority to get there. So try to understand these various nuances of prison. We offer a lot of this information through our interviews with people in prison. Both Justin and I produce many videos to try and help people understand. We have podcasts. We have a lot of books. We've got a lot of information to help you understand the journey ahead. But you want to be thinking that every time you speak with a staff member, from the moment you go there, you are creating a record. And that record can influence your journey. So be circumspect and be courteous and respectful, but understand everything you say is going to go into a file. And if you're not thinking, these things don't matter, everything matters in there, okay? So be very cautious of that. You're going to want to know how to send money into the prison system. And so we've created a video for you with instructions that include images of what boxes to check and how do you get through the whole thing. Make sure that you bring a identification card with you. And even though we're at the end of the pandemic, if you have a vaccination card, it probably makes sense to bring that with you as well. If you don't, if you are unvaccinated, that's a choice that you could make, and the Bureau of Prisons is not going to punish you for that. We're not going to get into all the quarantine stuff because I think a lot of that is coming to an end now. Is that right? Is that what we're hearing, Carol? Yeah, it's no longer where they're putting you in the hole for 21 days like they were a year ago or 6 months ago. Maybe Sam or Justin has some insight on quarantine if they're still doing that because they work more one-on-one with people. Sam and Justin, do you guys have
it depends on the institution. We had a client that surrendered to the camp in Miami. And he was he was remanded to custody. He finally made it to the camp in Miami, and he was in quarantine, and he was vaccinated, but he didn't have his card because he was remanded to custody. He was in quarantine there for 17 days. He just got out 3 days ago.
So it is going to be institution by institution, but I don't think it has the same emphasis as it did a year ago. So if you are vaccinated and you have a card, it's probably easier to bring the card. If you're not vaccinated, you're just going to have to roll with it, and you can roll with it. That's what's important to remember. You can get through this. We've all gotten through this. We are going to be here to support you all the way through it, but we want you to have resources along the way. And I have somebody who has a question, and I'm going to ask Ryan to unmute himself as we come here to the other side of this first webinar here on Per Surrender. Ryan, how can we help?
Hey, Michael. So I'm going to be going to Thompson and I'll be on the camp side. It's attached to a max prison as well. So as far as job placement goes, uh, my whole goal is to avoid going over to the max side for anything possible. I don't know if there's any reason that I have to go over there other than possibly just at the check-in day. But what if I am offered a job that's on the max side? Can I
That's a
refuse
great
that
question.
job?
Well, let's talk about it. First of all, you're not going to mix with the guys in the max. So don't have that fear. Okay. If you have a job in the max, it's not that bad. Okay. Because you would be doing something like working in the laundry that it's generally a shorter shift. So I worked in the laundry at a supermax prison, and you go. Are you an early riser, Ryan, or a late?
Yes, I am. I'm
So
an
I
early
used to
riser.
really like that job because I would get over there at like 5 in the morning and I would be done by like 9:30 in the morning, and I'd have the rest of the day to myself. And as I recall, it was I only had to work on Mondays and Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. So I had the rest of the time to myself. And while you're there, you're just there with 3 other guys from the camp, 4 other guys from the camp, and one officer who's generally pretty cool, treats you like a human being. And that's it. So it's just something for you to not worry about. I want to remove the fear that you'll ever be around max prisons. In fact, I am looking forward to meeting you, Ryan, because I have no doubt that I'll be presenting at the max prison. And when I'm there presenting at the max prison, I'm sure that I'll be presenting at the camp as well. So I'll get an opportunity to say hello to you, because I suspect that'll happen within the next 5 to 6 months. But you ask, what choices do you have? This is an area where we have to really use our discretion and our critical thinking skills. Okay. The goal is not the job. The goal is to come home. And we have got to be very judicious with respect to what questions are we asking? In what ways are we asking for help? You can ask, I'm going to assume what do you want to have in there, Ryan? Do you want to have free time or do you want to have structure?
Structure is my biggest goal.
Okay, then a place that has structure, and the reason that sometimes I can tell you that people that are just surrendering to prison, a lot of times structure is helpful because it helps you stay busy and run through the clock. And so a job in food services or a factory or a business office as a clerk, all of those are potential jobs that are going to keep you busy. Okay. They're going to mean you're going to go to work at 7:30 in the morning. You're going to come back for count or for lunch at 10:30. Then you're going to go back to work lunch, or you're going to count on the job. You're going to go to lunch. Then you're going to go back to the job until around 3 or 3:15. Then you're going to go back to your housing unit, which a lot of people find that helps them get through the day. I prefer to have no structure and control my own day, but that's because I served so long in prison. So you'll find what works best for you when you get there. But if you tell them you want to stay busy, some places where you could stay busy are food service. Some places where you could stay busy is in the business office as a clerk. Some places where you could stay busy are in the commissary. You've got as I recall, a relatively short sentence. They might task you with a job as like a town driver, where you're driving around the community and doing the local like Uber ride for people, which is a lot of people consider a good job. But I think that this is not the goal, Ryan. You're going to function no matter what. I think when you know that Thompson does have a supermax prison there, and Thompson is just one level below the ADX at Florence, the fear is, holy crap, I don't want to be around those guys. You won't. So eliminate any fears you have about ever having to interact with a high security person.
Can I add one thing? Thank you. When I got to prison, Michael encouraged me to look for jobs that may be open, because it took 2 weeks before I was assigned a job. So Michael said there's a pretty good chance you're going to get designated to the kitchen for 120 days, but that doesn't mean you can't walk around and look for in recreation or the library, a job that may be open. He just said, be proactive. And I did. And then even when I shared that with my case manager, she sort of laughed and said, well, you're still going to the kitchen. I shared that with Michael. He said, okay, well, why don't you try to find the best job in the kitchen? Do you want to be a baker at 4 a.m. or serve food 3 times a day? So just being proactive and looking really helped me design the best job, which was pots and pans in the afternoon and evening so I could exercise in the morning. And also something to address is, do you want a job just to stay busy, like 7-8 hours a day where you don't feel like you're in prison? Or do you want to find a job that's maybe an hour that allows you to have more of your own time? Some guys struggle with that because they feel bored to death. Others want to feel like they don't feel like they're in prison when they're working. So the job is very important. But if you get a job that's an hour a day, and if you're not productive and prepared or like documenting your journey, like Scott was doing through a website or growing your network, you're going to be bored. So the job is important. And we can discuss more of it, but I want to share, once you get there, be proactive and look for a job. If you find one, ask your case manager. She may say no, but be proactive.
So yeah, jobs are important. You're going to get your best information when you get to the camp. You're going to make some friends there. Scott, what was the best job at your camp, in your view?
It was tough because everybody had their preference about what was the best job for them. I think Justin made a great point in that you may show up and be assigned to the kitchen, and the best thing you can do is just accept it and do good work every day. Because if you want to talk about a way to have inmates like you and sink in with that community of people, do not complain and do your job to the best of your ability. It's amazing how much that helps. However, if you do get the chance, people who have come from other prisons, I learned from them, and how they get a job is on day one, they show up, they talk to other people, they get a recommendation for a job. You fill out what's called a cop-out, which is a way to request something, hand it to your case manager or your counselor, and then you can be assigned to that job. It's not guaranteed, right? But it's being proactive. So that's one of two things, right? You get assigned a job, you show up, you do it well, and eventually you can change. Or you be proactive, you find a good job, you fill out the proper paperwork, inmates will help you with that, and then you get that job. I worked in horticulture and I liked it. Great group of guys, out in the morning, gardening, didn't even feel like prison.
You also don't want to write a million cop-outs. I remember my friend Andrew wrote a cop-out asking for better peanut butter with less sugar.
Nice.
So whatever.
So I see that Jonathan has his hand raised. Jonathan, how can we help?
Yeah, hi. I'm sure that this whole RDAP topic has been exhausted, and sorry to bring it up even more.
Please bring it up every time you have a question.
Okay. Have you guys ever run into a situation where one of your clients who was expecting a certain number of months off because of their qualifications based on the length of their sentence, and whoever runs the RDAP at that facility just arbitrarily says, you know what, I know you want 12 or entitled to 12, but I'm only giving you 9. And just wondering if you guys have ever run into that with any of your clients, getting something like that. That's my question at the moment.
Well, I know my response, but I'd like to hear first from Justin, then from Scott.
As I understand it, it's if you complete the program, it's not arbitrary. The law allows that much time off of your sentence. The only time I've seen people we've had a few clients go to like Cumberland in Maryland. They had 21-month sentences. The drug coordinator let them into RDAP, and the drug coordinator said, I'll let you into RDAP, but I'm not going to give you 6 months off. I'm going to give you 3 months off of your sentence. That was the only time I've seen someone get less. And the drug coordinator is actually doing them a favor because they weren't even at 24 months, which is, I guess, technically the minimum. So maybe Sam or Scott can add on to this. I've never known I've seen people get into the program later than they like.
Sure.
As a result of getting in later, they didn't get as much time in the halfway house as they had hoped because they had to complete the program. I believe it's a law.
Yeah, and this is specifically about, unfortunately, where I'll be going at the Miami camp, and the doctor who runs it there, I guess it's a woman. I've heard a few people who had long sentences, 48 months or more, and she just was like, you're just going to get 9 months.
Okay, so
And
before I turn it
I
over
know
to
that
Scott,
woman.
yeah, before I turn it over to Scott, that may be true. I don't know. I know that sometimes we hear things that may not, be true. People may be
Mhm.
conveying the wrong message. Scott, you can touch on it. I know if unfortunately you don't get the 12 months, if that were to happen, I wouldn't complain. I'd express gratitude for the 9 months and not make matters worse. But I hope that doesn't happen. But if it does, to the extent that we can manage it, we'll be here to help.
And we'll get, after Scott, Sam has some direct knowledge on Miami, and we'll get his opinion. But Scott, what about you? Did you ever hear of anybody not getting 12 months that qualified for 12 months?
I have not heard of anyone having any issues with not receiving the time off when they participate in the program. I think it is exceptionally important to show up. And the number one goal.
Thank you,
is
sir.
to-
Have a wonderful day.
the
John,
number
can you
one
mute
goal-
yourself?
Sorry
Yep,
about that, guys.
Please mute yourself. Thank you.
The number one goal of RDAP is not to show up and start talking to your case manager and your counselor about the time off. The number one goal is you want to change, you want to grow, you want to contribute and get something from this program. It's 9 months, it's 3.5 hours a day. It's a long road. I understand the desire to want to do something to, quote, lock in your time off, but that doesn't come until you've completed the program. And I think the best thing to do is go there and give it your all. And people will respect that and they'll commend you for that. And I don't see you having any challenges, but like Justin said, they're there to help if that even happens, which I don't think is likely.
Sam?
John, and again, I only can speak for my experience at Miami camp. I do communicate with Dr. Torres, the head of that program, regularly. She's very fair. She doesn't choose, from my experience, the time off. It gets sent to Grand Prairie. That does an automatic calculation based on assuming you complete the program and what your sentence is. She doesn't have the latitude, my experience, to say you get 6, you get 3, you get 9. It is a direct function of sentence and completing the program satisfactorily. So I don't know if you're hearing who you're hearing that from, but from my experience at the place you're going, that's completely inaccurate.
So, and that's where I would just come in now, Jonathan, is it's one of the reasons that we have these webinars on hierarchy and authority levels in the Bureau of Prisons. Yes, the psychologist does not have the discretion to decide what's going to be any more than the gym supervisor has discretion on what books are going to be available in the library. That's just not the way it works.
Sure. Can I add one other thing that I
Please.
heard that this particular psychologist said, and Sam might be able to chime in on this again, is that some people who have started their drug abuse or drinking abuse around the time they knew they were getting in trouble, legal trouble, that to her that disqualifies them, and she probably wouldn't let them in because of that.
Well, I'll let Sam speak first and then I'll speak.
So it's my experience that if it's documented properly in your pre-sentence report, they will follow what's in the guidelines. And if it's in the pre-sentence report, if it's not documented in the pre-sentence report, and there's no, if the person's not working with a therapist or has the pre-sentence report amended to reflect the current situation, it's the client's not going to get, the person's not going to get in. You can't pull the wool over the eyes. And I had a client that showed up drunk one day, showed up drunk in prison, never had any problem whatsoever with alcohol, showed up drunk. He fell in intake and cracked his head open and thought that's how he would get in. That's not how it works.
And for clarity, we say we had a client.
Wait,
This is a situation where someone retained our team, and it's like they did the exact opposite, because no normal, we would never advise someone to do something so foolish. But at times, I know someone posted that online, show up drunk, this and that's going to get you in. And it comes back to, John, you may be hearing things just because someone says it's not true. Someone wrote you should show up drunk. They're going to put you into detox. It's a formality to get into the program. Totally went against our advice. Made matters worse for him and his family. So make sure you're getting the right advice. But I want to stress, no one, never would we advise someone to show up. That's
Right.
foolish, making matters worse.
Well, besides all of that, again, Jonathan, what somebody needs to do is they need to get the facts, and the facts are the policy. So we have published all of that on our website. I would encourage you to go to our website and type in RDAP, and you'll see an abundance of links, including the policy on RDAP, which says who qualifies. And if you qualify, it's not arbitrary. You're going to hear a lot of staff members say a lot of things. For example, in my view, nobody should get any time off. But that's irrelevant. You're a unit manager. You're not a member of Congress. Okay. You're not the director of the Bureau of Prisons or the Attorney General, right? Let's look at the policies and understand the policies so that we can advocate for ourselves in the best way. And I want to, so I just wanted to say that, Jonathan, make sure you look at the policy, read the policy, be aware of the policy. Don't take that information and try and shove it down someone's throat, but be prepared to hear a lot of rumors in prison, okay, that are just utter nonsense. And if you can't back it up with a policy, then just kind of move forward with aplomb and critical thinking skills and go forward. But I would encourage you, go to the Prison Investors website and look at the thing. Now, I see that there's a tremendous amount of chat activity. I'm going to assume that my partners have responded to everybody. If anybody didn't get their question answered, this would be the time to raise your hand. If I don't see a hand going up, I'd like to transition now into our new calculator that our newest team member, Brian, has been working really hard with me in creating. I see no hands. So Brian, how you doing? Are you there?
Michael, before you do that, I just wanted, there's a question about discussing FRP and it impacts you if you have restitution. Tomorrow morning, I'll discuss that. I also filmed a video that kind of covers my experience with restitution before, during, and after prison. And I'll touch on that a little bit more in the webinar tomorrow. And I'll also circle around to that video I filmed that kind of covered my whole journey through restitution over 12 or 13 years.
So the short answer to the question, though, of course, is yes. The
Yes.
FRP plan does affect restitution, and we cover that in our future webinars. So if you want to look at the past ones, that's fine. Our next week's webinar is going to be on disciplinary infractions and how that influences you. We really encourage you to attend and bring your questions. Is there any other hands up? I thought I saw a hand go up, and now I don't see the hand went up. But anyway, I'm not ending it right now. What I wanted to do is introduce Brian. Brian, why don't you say hello?
Hello.
Brian also is a recent return to society. How long ago did you get out of prison?
I was released September 8th.
And Brian is now working with us. I'm very excited to be building this calculator that we just continuously are revising because it's such a complicated matter. I'm going to share the screen now, Brian, so we can kind of go through it with anybody. First of all, does anybody want to be a case study and see where they kind of end up? How about Jonathan? I know you have 48 months. Is that right? Somebody? I can't hear Jonathan. I think he has 48 months.
Yes, 48 months. Yep.
So let's share this calculator here. And in full disclosure, we're still working on it, but we spent quite a bit of time on it this week. And let's just change the name here to Jonathan, actually. Jonathan. And Jonathan, when is your surrender date right now?
December 1st is the official date, although I might go in a little earlier, but I have to be there on December 1st at least.
12/01/22. Okay. And you have no jail time credit or 1 day. I mean, two.
Well, I have one day.
And just for everybody to know, if you spent any time in custody, including getting your fingerprints or mugshot taken, that counts. So everybody should have 1 day of custody if they've pleaded guilty. Okay, where's the rest? So here's the data entry points. All the green dates are how we're going to know where we put data, where we put information. So we don't know, we wouldn't know for Jonathan what the BOP is going to say his release date is. But what we've done is we've built these different projected release dates, right? PRD 0 is just the full-time date without good time. All it counts is your months plus your time off for jail credit. And if we were to do that, Jonathan, on our calculator today, it would show that you'd be getting out on April the 24th, 2026. Okay. And this is 22. So that's what we'd be looking at. But we can go across this thing and see some other things that are relevant to your sentencing date. And that is, when do you become within 18 months of your release date? And this is changes because you obviously are going to be earning RDAP credibility. So one of the things that we did to project when you would get into RDAP, we project that you will get into RDAP within 2 months of your surrender. And our parameter here is 2 months of your surrender and 48 months of your release date. Okay, that's when you'll get in. So we're saying you're going to get in there by January the 30th. So if we're projecting that the Bureau of Prisons is going to give you those 12 months off, that then changes your release date as follows. Now it's April 24th of 2025. And we know that you have 28 months until then, but we also have this concept of you've got 13 months is all before you're within 18 months of your release date. So it would seem that those 13 months are the time for you to accumulate earned time credits. And we would use that to start projecting forward, because that's what can really advance your release date. So let's say that you're going to get minimum, say you get 1 month of that, and then you're going to get 12 months with minimum pattern score. That's going to be another 180 days off of your sentence length. So we could play with these numbers to kind of project, well, when would that qualify you? Jonathan, could you answer for me right now? If I put his earned time credits on there in this version of where we are right now, have we built the formula that would adjust this date based on these earned time credits that I put in, or is that going to show up someplace else?
We have not gotten that far yet, except for it will not project the home confinement or the RRC months.
But what about this 180 days that I just calculated he's going to get in addition?
Not yet, no.
So that's not taken into category X then, right?
Not yet, no.
So right now, what we have for him is a release date of October of 23, but with what we know that there's going to be at least 6 months more off of that for RDAP, because he'll earn those earned time credits there for at least he'll get 6 months off. And it could get a year off, but call it 6 months. That would take him down to April of 23, if I just said hypothetically. And then you would have April of 23, and then you would have the Second Chance Act application to send you to home confinement. As much as, well, what's that going to be? If it's April of 23, would you get out?
I was under the impression that April of 23 would be the earliest, if everything went perfectly, that I would get out of the Miami facility and go to wherever.
Yeah, April of 23, if you're surrendering in 22.
Oh, I'm sorry, not April of 23, April of 24.
24. Because the RDAP's 9 month class.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. April of 24. But this is where your release date changes. So this is the point where you would stop getting earned time credits to apply to your release date. So in October of 24, you could still be earning earned time credits that is going to advance that. If we took that right now, release date more than 18 months release date. So your release date here, so you're saying October of 23. I don't know, why is that not a possibility? If
I get in there December 1st, it's my understanding that I'm going to have to at least serve about 15 months at that facility in Miami before I can go to any halfway house or.
Oh, that's right. Look at right here. We've got here your projected release date with RDAP. That's jail time credits, statutory good time, and RDAP is April 24th, 2025. That's your release date. You could get 12 months off of that early to get to the RRC. So you're right, April of 24. Yeah, that's
right. And the way that you get from April of 25 to April of 24 is the 6 months of FSA credits and 6 months of the halfway house time, correct?
Well, yes, the Second Chance Act would just take a year off of that, but you also are going to get these FSA credits that's going to advance that further. But I would say April of 25, if you surrender in December 22, you start in January, you finish in I think you could get out just like Scott did in about 14 months, 15 months.
And that's if the next RDAP class starts in January. It might start in February. It could start in March for all we know.
Yeah, but you're still going to get more than what they're going to give to you on that, because you're going to be getting credits for earned time credits as well. This is a calculator that we're spending a lot of resources to build, but it's not going to be done for several months because we've got to get a lot of case studies in here. And we've also got to see what is the Bureau of Prisons doing in different regions. What we will do for you is track you along while you're in there. Because if we can give you some parameters, hey, this is what we think you should get, well then we can, if you're not getting that, we could help guide you on different advocacy strategies, whether it's administrative remedy or even doing a pro se motion for you might want to do a pro se motion in court if you've got a long enough sentence. It might make sense to do 2241. There's just a lot of work going ahead. We just want to say that we're grateful that you've trusted us to be a member of your team. We don't ever want to be like your attorney as somebody who's disappointed you or dropped the ball in some kind of way. And I hope that you'll always find our team worthy of the trust you've placed in us.
I told Justin I would be up Schitt's Creek if it wasn't for you guys the last 3 years, I mean, so, but quick question, the Second Chance Act, this 6 months that you get in home confinement or halfway house time that is associated with RDAP, is that called Second Chance Act? Is that what that is?
No, and that's going to take a lot more time for me to discuss these different, very complicated prison reform movements, but we have a full webinar on that, on First Step Act, Second Chance Act, the CARES Act. I saw a thing on there, Joseph asked if it's still in existence. It is, but it's not quite the same thing because it wasn't passed by Congress. That's an executive order. But just keep coming back to the webinars and bring your questions. It's just you're asking a very big question that'll take me long time to present. So
sounds good.
I don't see any other hands, and it's 10 o'clock in California, 1 o'clock on the East Coast. I just want to thank everybody for giving us your attention. It's a real privilege for our team to be able to help you and share what we've learned. We're all striving to be the change we want to see in the world. And we do encourage you to bring your questions, and we look forward to seeing you next week. This will be on the webinar page by Sunday, and it'll have the links in there as well. So thanks so much. I'm going to end the webinar unless somebody raises their hand or unmutes themselves. Have a great weekend, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks.